Thank you for your interest in the kingdom of Jesus Christ. So we've been saved to tell the good news to other folks. Debbie and I just returned from Texas a little bit earlier. We spent several days down there with her, and I saw dinosaur tracks. I've got a bunch of photos. So we're here to listen to Brother Keno Shrum tonight, so we'll talk about that some other time. But I'm excited about Jesus. That is a name that's above every name. And our prayer should be that His name will become the most famous name in all of the earth. Jesus is the key to what's going over in the Middle East. They don't know about Him. Now, some do. But that knowledge needs to be spread far and wide. Keno is from the state of Oklahoma, just like Brant. And we appreciate Oklahoma. Go what? We're going to have an arm wrestling contest between the Cowboys and the Sooners, and we'll see what happens. But we appreciate him being here tonight. Let's enter into a prayer. Father, you are the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Your glory cannot be contained. It goes even beyond where the boundaries of the universe are. And Father, you are clothed with majesty and light. We're thankful for Jesus Christ, that when we were at our worst, He was at His best, as were you. Father, help us to get that message out. Bless Keno as he reminds us of some things that maybe we have known and forgotten, or maybe some things that we need to learn the first time. Help us to take what we hear these next 4 days and use it for your glory. Forgive us, Father. We pray for peace on the earth through the Prince of Peace and people's knowledge of Jesus. In His name we pray. Amen. Brother Keno.
It's good to be here this afternoon. I am from Oklahoma, and the Cowboys and the Sooners can get along now because the Sooners took off to the SEC, so there's nothing to fight about anymore. We're glad to be here this evening. My wife, she usually travels with me. We've been on the road for a couple of weeks, and her mother tonight is getting awarded an Employee of the Year and 40 years on the job at the school that she works at. So Jamie flew home today to be with her this evening, and then she'll be back here tomorrow. I'm going to pick her up at noon at the airport, and she'll be here tomorrow night. So I ask you to keep her in your prayers for safe journey. We are blessed to be able to travel all over. We spend about 210, 215 nights a year on the road, going to congregations and doing just what we're going to do here, which is the continued education program. So Rob was here last fall, and the information that Rob brings you is valuable. It's the start of congregational evangelism, and it's how we start to grow a congregation. But he couldn't give you all the information you need. If he did, you would be so overwhelmed that you would just probably throw your hands up in the air and forget about it all. In fact, you may have been pretty close to that anyway. Rob's seminars are like drinking from a fire hydrant, but it's valuable information, and we're blessed to be able to come behind him about 6 or 7 months after and bring you the continued education. So what we're going to do this week is more informal. Feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. We're going to break things down more the mechanics of it, like how do we accomplish these things that we learned about? Because I think that a lot of people will evangelize if they know how to evangelize. But you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know how to evangelize and somebody stands in the pulpit and says, hey, you need to go do this, well, you need to train me. I mean, I need to know what my job is. I need to know what my mission is. I need to know what I'm trying to accomplish. I need to know how to go about it. We're not all wired the same. We don't all have the same skills and talents. But you can bet there's somewhere for every one of us in that model that we've been looking at. So when Rob was here, let me see if I can get this to work here. There we go. When Rob was here, he taught you the model. It's a 6-step model: context, prospects, Bible studies, baptisms, new converts, and growing church. This is not Rob Whitaker's model. This is not Keno Shrum's model. This is Jesus's model. And so we're going to look at that a little bit later on this week. I want to really show you where Jesus is active in all this. But when we look at the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, verses 18, he says, all power, Jesus is speaking, He says, all power or all authority is given to me in heaven and on earth. Well, let me ask you something. If Jesus has all authority, how much authority do we have? You could say it. None, right? We don't have any. Jesus has all authority. And if he has all authority, then he has the authority to tell us to go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the age. I love that part, because he's not telling us to go do something and then just throwing us to the wolves. He said, I'm going to be with you. That means he's given you the resources, and you better believe he's given you the skills and the talent to be able to do it. We may say, I can't evangelize. I've never taught anybody. Well, you may not have to teach anybody, but you've got to be involved somewhere in this model, because that is a divine mandate. And we're going to stand before Jesus on that great day of judgment, and we're going to answer for whether or not we have helped lead lost souls to Christ. I want to ask you something. I don't want you to answer, but I just want to ask you, in the last 5 years, how many people have you had a hand in leading them to Christ? If you're like a lot of Christians throughout this country, that answer is probably 0, or maybe 1, or maybe 2. And look, I was the same way. I was in the pulpit preaching and still had a very low success rate at leading people to Christ, because I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never been taught how to evangelize. I'd heard it my whole life, right? I'd been in services. I grew up in the Church of Christ. I'd heard it my whole life. You need to be doing this, but no one ever taught me how to do it. You don't know what you don't know. So let's solve that this week. Let's learn how to do it. Know this, that Jesus never asked for 10 talents from a 2-talent person. So if he commanded you to do this, you got to know he gave you the skills and the talent to do it. When I started preaching almost 11 years ago, in fact, November of 2014, my dad was the minister. We had a small congregation. You know, we'd been about 70 members at one time, but American Airlines and McDonnell Douglas and Spirit Air, they had all laid off in the Tulsa area. So, 2/3 of our congregation moved to Oklahoma City and Dallas chasing their jobs. So that left us very small. We were maybe in the 30s. In 2015, we lost 6 members that passed away that year. So, when you're 30 people and 6 people die, that's a big hit to your congregation. So 2014, my dad and I were in the foyer, and we're putting sheetrock up, and because if you get rid of that old paneling, people will come worship. People aren't going to worship where there's old paneling from the 1950s, right? That's the thought process with a lot of congregations. So we didn't even take the paneling down. We just put the sheetrock right over the top of it. So we're in there, and I'm down on my hands and knees, and I'm cutting a piece of sheetrock. And my dad said, son, one of these days when you start preaching, and I raised up, I said, whoa, Dad, that ain't happening. I'm telling you right now, that ain't happening. And he said, well, one of these days you may preach. I said, Dad, I'm not going to do it. Now, my brother that preaches in Rise in Arkansas, I knew he was going to be a preacher. I said, Keaton, that's his name, Keaton. I said, Keaton will do it. I'm not doing it. I'm not getting up. I will throw up if I try to get up and talk in front of people. And so he told me, he said, well, just humor me. He said, and he gave me some advice about preaching. And I said, okay, Dad, but it's not going to happen. September 2015, he preached his last sermon on a Sunday night, died of a heart attack on Monday night. We didn't have a preacher, and guess who was in the pulpit Sunday morning? I was so nervous. I still got the outline. My first sermon was God's Amazing Grace. I read every word of all 6 verses of the song Amazing Grace. Then I led all 6 verses of Amazing Grace. Then I preached my sermon, and we were out in 9 minutes. I was terrified to speak in front of people. But you know what? I had the talent, I had the skill. God just had to develop, and I had to trust him. I had to step out of my comfort zone and trust God to develop that in me. And I'm telling you that to tell you this. You have what it takes to evangelize, but you just got to trust God. You got to step out of that comfort zone, and you've got to let God build that skill and that talent, and you'll be shocked what you can do for Christ when you're willing to work, when you're willing to step out of your comfort zone. So how are we going to grow a congregation? We need contacts. You guys have, roughly 230 people, so you need 2,300 contacts every year to grow by 10% a year. Matthew chapter 22, verse 14, he says, many are called, but few are chosen. Well, how do I get to the few? I got to go to the many, because I don't know who's going to answer the call of the gospel. None of us do. We don't have the foreknowledge. We don't have the insight. We have no way of knowing who will or who won't be a good candidate for the gospel. So we got to go to the many to get to the few. If you go to 2,300 contacts, you're going to get about 230 prospects. Then you got to figure out who out of that group is actually going to get into a Bible study. And we do that through various ways that we'll talk about this week. But here's what I want you to understand. 2,300 contacts will land you about 23 Bible studies. Many are called, but few are chosen. Now, I don't know what Bible study, maybe you use Back to the Bible, maybe you use something else, but I can tell you that, and there's some success. I'm not telling you have to use Back to the Bible. You can use whatever study you want to as long as it's a scriptural study. Maybe those of you with dark hair, you won't know what I'm talking about, but those of you with gray hair, anybody ever hear of Jewel Miller? Were any of you led to Christ by Jewel Miller film strips? So, Jewel Miller has led thousands upon thousands upon thousands. It's not a film strip anymore. It's a flash drive, right? But we still have it. House to House, Heart to Heart bought that a few years ago, and we still use it. It's very effective. Tim Hatfield, Alkira Road Church of Christ in Grove City, Ohio, has a wonderful Bible study. David Spruill down at Palm Beach Lakes has a wonderful Bible study. Ivan Stewart's Open Bible. You can use any Bible study that works. If you're leading, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people a year to Christ, keep doing what you're doing. But if you're not, Back to the Bible is a very easy one to use, and you'll see about a 90 to 92% success rate with it. So if you have 23 Bible studies, you'll baptize 22 of them, and it works. It works all over the country where people use it. So we got to get to the many to get to the few. How are we going to get contacts? Well, one way is bookmarks, and you guys have probably been doing that. You have your target list. You list 10 people that you know if they died tonight, they wouldn't go to heaven, and you list them out, and then we got to look for. We got to figure out when they're going to be ready to hear the gospel, because I wholeheartely believe almost everybody will be willing to hear the gospel at some point in their life. Not everyone, almost everyone. But we got to figure out who's going to do it today, because most of them aren't going to do it today. So we got to look for life-changing events. Somebody's got cancer. Let me ask you, does anybody in here know anybody within 20 miles of this building that has cancer right now by chance? Couple? Yeah. Did anybody know anybody that's lost a loved one in the last few weeks? Several? Those are contacts. Those are people that are ripe for the picking. That's what we call the low-hanging fruit. They're ready. They're ready. They're ready to be baptized. They just don't know it yet. You've got to reach out to them, prospect them, build a relationship with them. You remember Rob saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care? So you've got to show them you care, and you've got to build that relationship with them. And if you do that, you'll be able to get into a Bible study with them. But bookmarks won't get you all of them, because husbands and wives, they're going to have some duplicates on there. You're going to have some young kids. They're not filling out a bookmark. So we need some other ways to get contacts. We're going to talk about some of those this week. One in particular I want to talk about tonight, though. So let's talk about the different kinds of contacts. First is a cold contact, right? You go knock on their door. How many of you love to knock doors, by the way, just out of curiosity? I love to knock doors. If you'd asked me that 2 years ago, I'd have said, you're crazy. You can't lead anybody to Christ knocking doors. I'll teach you this week how you can do it. It's very effective, right? But a cold contact, I go knock on someone's door. I don't know them from the man in the moon. I've never seen this person before. I've never had a conversation with this person before. I don't know them. They're a cold contact. Can you convert somebody like that? Yeah, you can, and you should try. You should do it. But I want you to know it's going to take a lot of work. And I'm not saying don't do the work. You should do the work, but just know it's going to be some work, because you've got to first build a relationship. They don't know you from a Jehovah's Witness. They have no idea who you are. You're just somebody coming with a Bible in your hand. You're knocking on their door. They don't know anything about you. So you got to know. You got to know that you're going to have to build a relationship with that person, and we'll teach you how to do that. It's very effective, very easy to do, but it takes a little bit more work. As opposed to a warm contact, that's somebody that's your family, it's your coworkers, it's your neighbors, it's your people that you see around town. You know them, you talk to them, they like you, you like them, but you're not having gospel conversations with them, right? You're not talking about God. You're not talking about Bible studies. Why? Maybe myriad of reasons. Probably the biggest one is it's uncomfortable. You don't want to be standing on the assembly line next to your coworker every single day, all day. And if you bring up God and they don't agree with you, now it's become awkward. And so we just avoid the subject. You're sitting at the table at Thanksgiving. You got your family around you. Half of them don't know who God is. And you know that if they choke on that turkey leg, they're probably not going to heaven. But you don't bring up anything about God because you don't want to make it awkward at the face. I get it. Look, I get it. I've been there, done that. I understand that. We've got to figure out a way to start having gospel conversations with people. And we're going to talk about that later. But I want to talk about the hottest contact, and that's a visitor. Folks, if somebody comes and sits in your pews, they are ready to be baptized. Let me ask you this. Well, we'll get into that in a minute. So what's the number one thing that you, now if you've heard Rob say this, don't answer it. Some of you, I know, don't cheat. But the rest of you, what do you think the number one thing that visitors want to do when they come into a church building is? Sit down. He knows the answer, right? He cheated. No, I'm just kidding. They want to sit down. They don't want to be mauled in the lobby. They don't want somebody out there patting them down, checking the terror watch list. They don't want somebody giving them their whole life story. They want to come sit down. Just think about you when you go into a congregation. You know, you're out traveling, you're on vacation. What do you want to do? You want to go sit down. My wife beelines straight for a seat and finds it. Sometimes I'm out there in the lobby and she comes back up there and gets me. Let's sit down. You know, quit talking. So we come in and sit down. Let's talk about how we handle visitors. Let's talk about the different greetings. So there's the cold shoulder. Have any of you ever been to a congregation and gotten the cold shoulder? It's uncomfortable. It's no fun. I don't like to get the cold shoulder. Any of you know have you ever watched the PBR, the Professional Bull Riders, before, anybody? My wife and I used to own a bull riding magazine, and we were the partner publication of the PBR. So we traveled 42 states every year, and wherever the PBR Built for Tough series was, that's where we were every week. So on Sundays, we would just Google a congregation, you know, if we're whatever the area is, and that's the congregation we would go to. We were in Arkansas one day, and we went into a big congregation of about 400 people. We come in, we've been on the road, you know, we're looking for the bathroom, you know, and we can't find the bathroom. We're wandering around like a lost cause out in the foyer. Not one soul spoke to us. Now, they got this big welcome center. It's a big, like a big half-moon shaped counter that says Visitor Welcome Center. It's like you're traveling down I-40 and you're coming into a new state, right? The Visitor Welcome Center. There was nobody in the Visitor Welcome Center, but they had one. And they had bulletins and they had, you know, flyers and stuff. We look around. We finally find the auditorium. Huge auditorium. I mean, 3 times, maybe 4 times, 3 times the size of this auditorium. Packed full of, there's a lot of people. There's over 400 people in here, right? You know, and there's still room to grow. Not one soul spoke to us. We stayed there. We worshiped. We got up and left. Not one soul spoke to us. That is not a congregation that I want to go to, right? I want to go somewhere where I can have some conversations, where I can visit with people. It was just sad that 400 people and no one spoke to us. When I first started working with House to House, I was working part-time. This is in 2023, and I was doing Sunday refreshes. It's kind of like a miniature version of what we're doing right now. It was more just to motivate the congregation, to re-engage them a little bit. I got a call from a deacon. He said, will you come help us in this town? And I said, yeah, I'll come help you. He said, you got to know that nobody's on board for evangelism. My elders don't support it. He said, the members don't support it. He said, Keno, I've literally, everything, my wife and I are doing it all, and we're burnt out. He said, I need some help. I said, I'll be up there. We scheduled it, and we went up there. We walk in. The preacher only spoke to me because I spoke to him, and then it was just yes or no. I mean, he wasn't having any conversation. The elders didn't speak to us. The members didn't speak to it. They invited me to come there, and nobody speaks to us. So I did the first 2 lessons. It was just a one-day deal on Sunday. They had a potluck lunch. My wife and I, you know, they told us to go through the line first, so we went through the line. We sat down. Nobody sat with us. I looked at my wife. I said, do we have the plague or something? Like, nobody sat with us in the entire building until the deacon, who was the last one in line, he came and sat with us. His wife didn't even sit with us. That was a cold congregation. We went back out and we did the next 2 sessions. These people were sprinting out the building. We got outside. I took my suit coat off and I was putting it on a hanger, hanging it up in the back seat of the car, you know, and my wife said, Keno, look at the parking lot. It looked like the Dukes of Hazzard. They're like peeling out 2 wheels trying to get out of this parking lot. They didn't want to be there. It was a very odd situation. So nobody wants a cold shoulder. So what about the casual nod? You know, the casual nod is, you know, sometimes you know you need to say something, but you just don't know what to say. You're not a real people person, so to speak. So let's say if you're the visitor, you know, and I'm just going to go like this. So, just a quick, what's up? You know, I'm not going to speak to him. I'm not going to tell him my name. I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to acknowledge that he's present, and then I'm going on about my business. People aren't wanting that, are they? What's up? That's right. That's right. Then there's the overboard. You're recording this, right? I hope my mom doesn't see this. My mom was born December 6th of 1951. And until we got her trained, if we had a visitor come to our congregation, she would catch them at the front door, and she'd have them there for 20 minutes, and she'd tell them everything that happened in her life since December 6th of 1951. No one else could get a word in. You couldn't talk to, she had them cornered up. And now here's the problem with that. She's just being friendly. She's a friendly person. But here's the problem with that. Next thing you know, one of the men's up behind the podium. They say, okay, good to see everybody here this morning. The announcements start. And she finally lets them go. They come and they sit in the back. And then as soon as service is over, they get up and leave. And we don't know who they are. Hey, Mom, did you get their name? No, I didn't ask them that part. Do you know who they are? Nope. Do you know where they're from? Nope. They know everything about her, but we don't know nothing about them. I can't evangelize to somebody that I don't know how to contact. I need some contact information, right? So I had to really work with my mom and train her on that. She just wanted to be friendly. So what we're looking for is not the cold shoulder, it's not the casual nod. We don't want to go overboard. We want the Christian greeting. What does that look like? How many openings, like when I came in this door right here. Is there other doors to come into to get in here? Like would people come in? So a couple of entrances, 3 entrances. So you need to have, I would recommend you have door greeters on every entrance. So when people come up, there's somebody to greet them on every entrance. A lot of times we'll do the main one. Have somebody at every entrance that somebody might come into. Do you guys do bulletins on Sunday mornings or any kind of handout or anything? Okay, so yeah, if you have a handout, you can hand it out. If not, no big deal. So you have your door greeter out there. Maybe it's maybe use some of your teenage boys. It could be anybody. They work very good at it. So they're going to stand outside the door and they're just going to welcome somebody. So if I come to the door and I'm a visitor, you know, and the door greeter's just going to say, you know, if you're coming up and you're visiting and I'm the door greeter, I'm just going to say, hi, my name's Keno. We're glad to have you here this morning. If you'll just come right in here, it's the auditorium. Now listen to this part. We don't have assigned seats. Are any of you sitting right now in the seat that you normally sit in when you're here? Just raise your hand if you are. That is amazing. I'm going to tell you something. 90% of the congregations no, let me take it back. 99.9% of the congregations I go to, everybody will be in the exact same seat they sit at. I was at a congregation the other day in North Florida, and they have pews like this with these. We didn't have these kind of pews in our building. We had old hardbacks, right? There's a guy that sits there, and he kind of got bony elbows. There's 2 indentions, one there and one there. He sits in the same seat. He has elbow indentions in the back of the pew from sitting in the same place every time. That's his seat. Nothing wrong with that. But if a visitor sits in your seat, please don't ask them to move, because I've seen that happen before too. Please don't ask them to move. We're going to tell them we don't have any assigned seats. Sit anywhere you like. That's all the door greeter's going to do. They're going to come walking by, 200 of you in the foyer, and here's what I want all of you to do. Say hi, smile, wave, thank them for being here, but do not get into a conversation with them. Let them come sit down. We're going to go up to Illinois to a congregation in a few weeks, but I was talking to the preacher up there last year. We were together on an American mission campaign, and we were talking about this, and he said one of his elders didn't believe that people just want to sit down. And he said one day this couple comes in, and man, everybody's just mobbing them, and they're talking, and it goes on forever. And say you're right there, you're the elder, and his wife's sitting here, and this couple comes in and sits right here. And the man looked at his wife, the visitor. He looks at his wife, and he goes, whew, that was a lot. And the elder said, wow, that is what they want to do. They want to sit down. They don't want to be mobbed. They don't want 20 questions. They don't want that. They want to come sit down. So be friendly, wave, welcome them, but don't get in a conversation, because we need something that they got, and you got your pew greeters time to get it. Do you guys have pew greeters yet? Have you established pew greeters? How many teams of pew greeters do you have? 10 teams? Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, that'll work just fine. How many visitors do you get on an average Sunday morning? 1 or 2? Well, I'm going to tell you something, folks. When you start evangelizing, you get this thing kicked off and rolling, like after we get done with this and you really kick it off and going, you're going to get a lot more visitors. And I'll tell you why. I don't know why it works like this. We never got visitors. We're a tiny congregation. We were 22 members when Rob came and did our seminar in the middle of COVID. Within 3 years, we were 70 members. And we went from having a visitor once every 4 or 5 months to having 4, 5, 6 visitors every single Sunday. Every Sunday we were having visitors. You know, a lot of times they're passing through, but they were there. So you need to have pew greeters, and the pew greeters have one mission, and that mission is to get that person's contact information. We can 85% of them, we can get them into a Bible study, but we got to have their contact information. So let's talk about how we're going to get that information. You're just in the right spot, so I'm just going to use you, right? So he comes in, he sits down, he's a visitor. I'm on the pew greeter team. So now listen, if he sits there, members, leave this seat open because I need to sit in this seat as a pew greeter. The back one will work all right. We usually say the front or the one in front or the one behind. But I would rather me be kind of uncomfortable turning around talking than him have to be uncomfortable turning around talking. So it's better if I can sit right here. And so I'm just going to come in and welcome just, hey, how you doing this morning? Good. My name's Keno. What's your name? James. It's great to have you here this morning. Now, I got to investigate. I got to find something out. Is he from here or is he traveling through? Is he already a member of the church or is he never been inside a Church of Christ before? I need to know that. If he's already, if he's just traveling through or he's already a member, I'm going to tell him, hey, you can go ahead and leave because we're not interested. No, I'm not going to do that. But he's not my target, right? If you're already a member and you're just passing through and you stopped here to worship or you're in town visiting, obviously we love having you here. We're glad you're here, but that's not my target. If he's just passing through, that's not my target. Now, I still want his contact information because if he tells me he's just, I'm saying, have you been to a Church of Christ before? And he's going to say, no, I was just driving down the road. I was going from, what's someplace south of here? He's going from Kingston Springs. Where would you be going that would lead you through Dixon? I mean, through White Bluff. Dixon, okay, that worked out. I'm staying in Dixon, so that's why that was on my mind. So he's going from Kingston Springs to Dixon, and he's just passing through, and the Lord told him he should stop and worship at the White Bluff Church of Christ, right? You'll hear that kind of stuff, right? So he tells me that. I'm going to say, well, are you moving to Dixon, or are you just going up there to visit?
I'm visiting.
He's visiting. Now, what can I do? I can get his contact information, and I can call the church in Kingston Springs and say, listen, you've got a guy that stopped from your community and worshiped with us, so there's some kind of interest there. Here's his information. He said he'll be back there in a week. You might want to reach out to him and see if you can engage him in a Bible study. Maybe he tells me he's moving to Dixon. I can call the Church of Christ over there. I think I saw Pomona. Is that what it's called? Pomona Church of Christ? I saw it today. So I can say, you call over there. And so we're going to still try to teach him vicariously through them, right? I can do a long distance. He could tell me I'm from Miami and I'm going to Wisconsin. I can still have a Bible study with him, but it's much more difficult to do it long distance. If I can engage a congregation locally, now, maybe that congregation has no idea how to evangelize. Then I could tell the preacher, hey, I'll tell you what, let me set up a Zoom meeting to go through back to the Bible with this guy, and I'd like you to be on that meeting with me as well, because when it comes time for lesson 3 in the baptism part, I need you to be able to be there to jump on that and to help him with that. And I've done that before. I've had a case before where I had to travel to where they were at to do lesson 3, and we'll do that if we need to. We're going to teach him, but that's not our target. Any way that we can grow the kingdom, that's good. We want to grow the kingdom. But for the purpose of this training and this seminar, we're trying to grow this congregation. What's the biggest you guys have ever been? Just rough guess. 600? Yeah. So you've been 600 people, now you're 230. You're going through the exact same thing that 90% of the churches of Christ across America are going, right? We're losing a congregation of the Lord's church every 3 days in America. 150 congregations a year close their doors. I was in Town Creek, Alabama, at the Hatton Church of Christ last year, and they said, Keno, in this county alone, we have lost 4 congregations in the past 12 months. In one county. We're seeing it all over the country. We're losing over 18,000 members a year. That's why what we're doing right now tonight is so important. We got to do this. We got to get the church turned around and go in a different direction. This is how we're going to do it. So let's say he comes in. I introduce myself. We go through all the same thing. I'm going to say, are you from this area? You're just passing through. And he's going to say, I'm from this area. I just bought a house right down here. Is there a big company that people work for around here? Like, who would that be? Where do you live? So you're just here visiting? You're literally a visitor? No. Okay. I just say, man, this really worked out, didn't it? I'm figuring to try to convert him. Who would somebody be working for around here? Dow Tile. I've heard of Dow Tile. I've heard of that before, right? So he said, I just got a job. I moved from Kingston Springs. I'm living here now, and I'm working for Dow Tile. I'm right down the road, 4 blocks down here. I bought a little house, and I just woke up this morning, and we had got a copy of House to House, Heart to Heart in our mailbox, and I told my wife we need to go worship somewhere, so we wanted to come here and try you guys out. That's who I'm looking for. So then the next thing I'm going to say is, well, I'll tell you what, brother, we've got a gift that I'd like to give you, and I'll be right back. I'm going to run and grab that. Now, you guys have visitor bags, right? And the greeter teams know where they're at. At the empty greeting station. Okay, somebody go behind the greeting station and get one. How do you get people's contact information? Do you have cards in the pews, or how do you get that information? And do they give it to them, or how do they get the information? Thank you. So you guys know a lot of this. It'll be a refresher for you. You guys know a lot of this. Do you know that most congregations will stand up here and they'll say, hey, welcome everybody. We're glad you're here. If you're visiting with us, we ask that you would take a card out of the pew back and fill it out and place it in the collection plate, and we'll have a record of your attendance. And for your convenience, we've also got a QR code up on the screen, and if you'll scan that QR code, we'll have a record of your attendance. That's the way most congregations do. That works 32% of the time. You got to get their information. And you can do that 99% of the time. Unless he's a serial killer, that's the only way he's not going to give it to me. But 99% of the time he's going to give it to me. And the reason he's going to give it to me is because I'm giving him a gift, right? So I come in and I hand him the visitor bag, and I say, what? We're glad you're here this morning. I say, we're a card sending church. Would you mind if I got your name and address and mailed you so we can mail you a card? Absolutely, he's going to give it to me, right? 99% of the time you're going to have the contact information. Now, as long as you have the contact information, your job, you've accomplished your mission. What happens after that is just icing on the cake if you can make it happen. So I'm going to sit right here. When the lesson's done with, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to ask him. I'm going to say, well, how'd you like the lesson today? I'm going to take you out to eat. Man, you're pretty bold just to ask it, right? He's pretty bold, man. Do you want to go somewhere expensive? No, no, you can't come, no. I'm going to ask him if he wants to go out to eat. 50% of the time that's going to happen, 50% of the time. I'm going to take him out. There's some things that I want. Do you remember your introduction questions that Rob gave you? Anybody remember the introduction questions? If you don't, write these down. If you don't remember, write them down. Introduction questions. Where are you from? I ask people, I just get in a habit of asking everybody you meet, wherever you're at, ask them, where are you from? I might word it a little different. Sometimes I might say, hey, are you from this area? When I go into a congregation, I'm always asking people that. People like to talk about where they're from. They may be from an area that I'm familiar with. Now we've just made a contact. In sales, there's a theory called story selling, and the premise behind it is this. If you could connect with somebody in the first 90 seconds that you're talking to them, your chance of making a sale goes right through the roof. Now, I've had people tell me, well, Keno, don't talk about sales. We're preaching the gospel. We're not selling anything. Well, do you have something that you want them to want what you have? Yeah, you have salvation, and you want them to want. So what's the difference in sales? We're not selling it to them with money, but we're trying to persuade them to want what we have. We know that what we have is something that's very, very valuable, and we want them to have it. And so if I can connect with him on something, where are you from? Like, where'd you grow up at? I was probably going to say Kingston Springs. We're at in the Smoky Mountains. Marville. Is that close to the Sevierville area? I thought I'd heard of that before. Just outside. Yeah, okay, yeah. So I'm going to start trying to talk to him about that. I've been there in that area a little bit. I'm going to start talking to him about the Smoky Mountains. I'm going to talk to him about things that we've seen back there, things that we've done. Now, we've made a connection on that. And we're going to visit about that for a while. And then I'm asking him the second question. What do you do for a living? I already knew that. You already told me that in the foyer. No, I'm just kidding. But Caterpillar, look, I had a construction company for years. I've had Caterpillar dozers. I've owned several of them. I've run Cat excavators. I've run Cat skid steers. I know a lot about Cat equipment. I've used a lot of it. Now, him and I have just got something we can connect on. And it's gonna make him feel at ease with me. We're going to start visiting, and he'll just open up. He'll tell me all kinds of things. He might tell me stuff that I don't even want to know, right? You remember two of the principles that Rob taught you when he was here? One of them was hearken, right? We listen more than we speak because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So we're going to hearken. I'm going to listen to the things. He might say something that I need to know. And then when I hear it, I got to hesitate. I got to wait until the right time to address this. My wife and I took a young couple out. One of our 20-year-olds had brought them, invited them to come worship. They came and worshiped. She's about probably 4 months pregnant at this time. We asked them if they'd like to go out to lunch. We're out to lunch, we're visiting, and we're asking them how they met and all this stuff, and it comes up, they're not married. They're living together, but they're not married. Okay, I've got to deal with that. I'm not dealing with it today. If I try to deal with it today, I won't get the Bible study. But I know I've got to deal with it. So I hear it, now I'm going to hesitate, and I'm going to file that back and remember it, and when the proper time comes. So we got into a Bible study with them. We went through lesson 1, went through lesson 2, started going through lesson 3. We got to the point of repentance. Now I got to deal with it. But now they've got a little bit of word, right? They've got a little bit of understanding of Jesus and how things are going to work. And so now I can deal with it. I gave them some solutions. You know, I can't baptize you until we take care of this. But here's some things that you could do. And we gave them some scriptural solutions to it. They took care of it. We're able to baptize them a short time later. And so, you know, listen to what he's going to tell you when you ask those questions. Then the third question is, what do you like to do for fun? Do you have any hobbies? Ride motorcycle. What kind of motorcycle you got? I got a Kawasaki Drifter. You remember the Drifters look like the Indians? Yeah, and I got the Indian up on the fender, and I got the Indian on the side. It looks just like an Indian. I was at a gas station one time, and a guy rode up on an Indian, and he asked me where I got my Indian. Not an Indian. It's Kawasaki. He thinks it's an Indian. No, I didn't tell him any different, right? So right off, there we go. Here's something else we can connect on. My son rides motorcycles. I ride motorcycles. You know, I rode bikes for years. My first bike was a 1972 Suzuki GS 750, you know, and so I could sit and talk bikes with him all day long. We've connected on something. My chance of getting him into a Bible study, I wish you weren't already baptized. I'd baptize you before the end of the night tonight. We'd be in a Bible study. I'd cancel this deal, and we'd just go sit down and have a Bible study. What happens is, I spent a lot of years in law enforcement. I was an investigator at a sheriff's office. And I could investigate, you know, I worked narcotics for a few years. I worked fatalities for a few years. But one thing that I could not do was interview a child that had been assaulted in some way. I didn't have the training for it. I didn't know what I was doing. So I would take them to a place that was called Help in Crisis. It was a division of the district attorney's office. And I would take them to Help in Crisis. And there was a forensic interviewer. And she'd take a little bitty kid, you know, 3, 4 years old, and she'd go into a room, and in this room they had carpet that looked like a town. They had roads and stuff, and she had little cars they could drive around. And she would just tell them her name, and she'd find out their name, and she'd just start playing with them. And she'd play with them for about 4 or 5 minutes. She'd say, well, I'll be right back. I've got to do something. And she'd get up and walk out. And she'd stand out there, and her and I'd visit for 2 or 3 minutes. Then she'd go back in there, and she'd sit down and play with him again. And then she'd come back out, and then she'd go back in, and she'd play with him again. And this would go on like 3 or 4 times. By the 4th time that she came in and said, that kid thought they had known her their whole life, right? She was very familiar to them. They'd seen her come and go 4 times, you know, and they would just open up and tell her the answers to everything that she asked because they felt comfortable with her. So all we're doing, we're trying to build a relationship so that he feels comfortable with me because I'm going to get to those transition questions, and I want to get him into a Bible study, and I need him to feel comfortable with me when we do that. So maybe it happens at lunch that day. I've literally left services, went to lunch, went through the three introduction questions, and then do you remember the transition questions? So how did you like the White Bluff Church of Christ today? Good. Do you know much about the Church of Christ? Yeah, a little bit. Whatever. Maybe he's been. I went there with my grandma a couple times when I was a kid, or maybe he says he's never been there before. Whatever, he's going to tell me. And then I'm going to ask him, would you like to know more about the church? It's kind of how we worship, why we. You probably noticed we don't use instrumental music. That's different than a lot of denominations. There's some things we do different. Would you be interested in sitting down and studying about that? And I can just show you why, you know, and just give you the information. You can do what you want with the information. I've had that happen on a Sunday, and we had somebody baptized within a few days. I've also taken somebody to lunch on Sunday, and it was 4 years before I got into a Bible study with them. I have people ask me all the time, how do you know when it's the right time to ask those transition questions? All I can tell you is you'll know. I don't know how you know, but I can tell you every single time that I've had a Bible study, you know, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've probably done close to 70 Bible studies that my wife and I have done with people, and every single time, I just know when it's the right time. You feel that connection with them. And then you ask those transition questions, and you're into a Bible study. So, you know, look, 85% of your visitors you can get, let me rephrase that. 85% of your visitors that live in this area that come in, you'll get into a Bible study. You're not going to get all your passing through, you know, traveling through people into a Bible study. And you're going to have a good number of them that are going to come in that may already be a member of the church. We're talking organic, lost souls in your area. 85% of them you can get into a Bible study if you do this. But you got to go through those questions. You got to spend that time. You got to investigate if they're local or temporary. You got to give them the gift bag. Now look, I've got his contact information. Who's over the contact cards here? Or the compassion cards? You're over that? So I got to get her that contact card like ASAP, right? She needs that. Because I'd like to get that to her before we go to lunch so that tonight we can write compassion cards for this individual. I don't need all the information. Do y'all use this contact card? I don't need all that information. In fact, here's what you might do. You might go under the highlighter and just highlight name, address, phone number, email address maybe. And then that way your greeters know that's all we need. I don't need to know all that other. Later on I'm going to need that, but I don't need that right now. So just that little bit of information, right? And I'm going to get it to her, then she can transfer it to the prospect list. Do you guys use this prospect list? Here's what I would do. I would go on there. We named it a prospect list so you know what it is, but I would go on there and change that. You can do it on the website, on the spread. I would change that to neighbor list or card list or community list. The reason I say that, we had some visitors one time on a Sunday morning, and they came back on Sunday evening, but they came in early, like 30 minutes early, and we're all back in the fellowship hall feeling like, and here they just came walking in, They said, hey, how you doing? We was doing that, and they said, what do you guys got going on? And, oh, we're just filling out, cards. They're one of the couples we filled out cards for. They got a big kick out of it. They sat down and filled out a card to themselves, thanking him for coming and visiting. We all had a good laugh about it. It was fun. So, but I don't want a visitor seeing their name on a quote-unquote prospect list, because then they're going to say, well, what am I a prospect for? What are you trying to sell me? So I'm going to change the name of that to community list or something like that. 5 to 7 visitors for each week per 100 members. This is how many to see growth, this is what you're looking for. So, and trust me, you'll see those visitor numbers come up as you guys really start getting involved with your community. So, taking them out to eat, remember that part. Any questions about how to handle a visitor? Look, if you guys do this, and if the members listen, if you're not on the pew greeting team, then you're support, right? I was in the military. Any of y'all ever in the Army or the military? Anybody? I was in the military. I was a military police officer. My son is an infantryman. He's in the military and he's in the infantry. He's always trying to tell me, Dad, there's only one MOS. It's infantry. Everybody else is infantry support, right? That's his mindset. Well, you got pew greeters and everybody else is pew greeter support. Let them do their job. Now, if he comes back and visits again next week, y'all have at him. Tell him your life stories. Visit with him if you want to. When he said, start building relationships. That's fine. But week 1, we got to get his contact information. And we can't do that if he's cornered up somewhere in the foyer. So let the pew greeters do their job. Let them get that information on week 1. And then we'll start sending out those compassion cards. Now, compassion cards are only effective if you're doing the transition visits. Have you guys started doing the transition visits yet? Anybody? So that's the only way compassion cards are effective. I've seen so many congregations mail the cards and they never do anything else. And they say, Keno, we're spending all this money on cards and it doesn't work. Well, it won't work unless you do the transition visit. You got to go over and build that relationship with him. So I'm going to find out from where he's at. We mailed him the compassion cards. Now, in 2 or 3 weeks, when those cards are done mailing, I got to go back over to his house and I got to visit with him. I'm not going to go to your house. What are you going to do? Well, we'll stand on the front porch and visit. Here's what I'm probably going to do. If he goes to lunch with me, I'm going to invite him to come to my house. Remember, the first time you go out to eat, do not take them to your house. Take them to a restaurant. This isn't 1965. They don't want to come to your house. They don't know if you're going to kill them. You don't want to go to their house. You don't know if they're going to kill you. So just go to a restaurant the first time. Do you guys have a plan in place for when it comes to taking people out to lunch every week? Some people can do that as part of their alms giving. Do you guys have a reimbursement plan or some sort like that in place? That's great. Just something, some members can't afford to do that every week, and so if they're on the pew greeter team, they may need some help with that. But what I'm gonna do when we get done eating, I'm probably gonna say, hey, I really enjoyed visiting with you. I said, why don't you come over to my house Friday night and we'll throw some burgers on the grill and we'll continue getting to know each other. And I'll get them to my house. If I can get them in my kitchen table, we'll have a Bible study, I promise you. I cannot tell you, I don't even remember if there was a time when someone came and ate at our house that we didn't have a Bible study with. May not have happened that week, but it happens. It always happens when you get them to your kitchen table. In fact, I don't even let people sit at when we have company come over, they'll try to go in the living room, sit on the couch or the sofa. I always tell them, oh, no, that's for company. You guys come here where family sits. We sit around the kitchen table. And used to, my wife would, the wife would say, well, do you need help with anything? And my wife would say, oh, no, I got it. And then we got to talking about it. I said, you know what? Let them help. So now if the lady says, can I help you with anything? My wife says, sure, if you want to get some glasses and ice and start, preparing the glasses. And that way she can be in the kitchen working on them while I'm in the dining room working on the husband. And we can start getting this going. Have you seen the recipes for evangelism book that you had in your supplies? I was sharing this with Cody, I think, today. My wife, her grandmother was full-blood Italian, and she makes a lasagna that will knock your socks off. It's delicious. Some of the best lasagna you ever had. So she's looking in this cookbook, and it's got a lasagna recipe, and it stood out to her. And so she's looking at it, and she gets down through it, and it says, use a jar of store-bought, like ragu or something. She said, I am not putting ragu in my lasagna. Ain't happening. And I said, do what you want to do, Jamie. So we had a Bible study scheduled. She spent 5 hours making lasagna. It was delicious. I loved it. They loved it. The study went very well. But then the next week we have another Bible study. The next week we have another Bible study. The next week we have 2 Bible studies. One week we had 3 Bible studies. Now my wife goes to Costco and buys cases of ragu. I told her it's not about you're not in a gourmet cooking contest. Just put something edible on the table and let's have the Bible study. Sometimes we order Domino's pizza. Sometimes we'll go, just go pick something up and bring it back or have sandwiches. It doesn't matter what you feed them. Just feed them something and then get into your Bible study. It works very, very well when you can get somebody at your kitchen table because they feel like you care about them and they feel like they're a part of your family. Any questions on the visitor part?
Just one thing. So when you go on the transition, what are some
So I don't have any problem standing out in the front yard and having a conversation with them. All I'm trying to do is build a relationship. And we're going to have a session over that later this week. But when I go out and knock on the door, it's going to be, when they open the door, most people immediately step out onto the porch if they don't want you in their house, right? They're going to step right out onto the porch. And I'm fine with that because when I knock on a door, I back up away from the door. I might step down off the porch and step in the yard, and I'll let them come down to where I'm at. And then I'm just going to start visiting just like I would. I don't care if I'm in the house or out of the house. Whatever's comfortable for them, I want them to be comfortable. We'll go much more. When we do our door knocking session this week, we'll go much more depth into the transition visits. What to say, what not to say, what kind of information you're looking for, how we're going to build that relationship with people when we do those visits. Anything else on the visitors? Let's take about a 6-minute break. Let's come back in, and we're going to talk about how to close a Bible study. Now listen, how many of you have ever done a Bible study? I don't care what you're using, but how many of you have done a Bible study? A few of you have? Sometimes when you do a Bible study, they don't convert. You might go through back to the Bible, has a 90% conversion rate, but they don't convert. Then what do you do? That's what we're going to talk about in the next session. So